The first is that the Reserve Bank has long had very flexible market operations that allow us to ensure adequate liquidity in the financial system. We have used this liquidity in the past, particularly during the global financial crisis, and we're prepared to use the flexibility that we have again in periods of stress if it's necessary to do so. At the moment, though, Australia's financial markets are operating normally, and our financial institutions are able to access funding on reasonable terms. In any given currency, the Australian banks can raise funds at the same price as other similarly rated financial institutions around the world, and markets are not stressed, there's no dysfunction. So there is no need to change our normal market operations or to do anything unconventional here. Having said that, if markets were to become dysfunctional, you can be reassured by the fact that we have both the capacity and the willingness to respond. But this is not the situation we're in currently. Things are operating normally, and we don't need anything unconventional here. The second observation is that negative interest rates in Australia are extraordinarily unlikely. We are not in the same position that has been faced in Europe and Japan. Our growth prospects are stronger, our banking system is in much better shape, our demographic profile is better, and we've not had a period of deflation in Australia. So we're in a much stronger position than Europe and Japan, where they've had negative interest rates. More broadly though, having examined the international evidence, it's not clear to me that the experience with negative interest rates has been a success. While negative interest rates have certainly put downward pressure on the exchange rate and helped lower long-term bond yields, they've come with other effects too. It's become increasingly clear to me that negative interest rates create strains in parts of the banking system that can impair the ability of banks to provide credit to businesses and households. Negative interest rates also create problems for pension funds that need to fund long-term liabilities. In addition, there's accumulating evidence that negative interest rates can encourage households to save more and spend less, especially when people are concerned about the possibility of lower income in retirement. A move to negative interest rates can also damage confidence in the economy as people worry about the future, and that the negative interest rates reinforce those worries. Given these considerations, it's not surprising that some analysts now talk about the reversal interest rate. That is the interest rate at which further cuts in the rate become contractionary rather than expansionary, turning the normal transmission on its head. While we take the possibility of a reversal rate seriously, I am confident that here in Australia, we're still a fair way from it. Conventional monetary policy in Australia is still working, and we see evidence of this in the exchange rate, in asset prices, and the boost to aggregate household disposable income. So we're not near the reversal rate, but we need to take that possibility seriously. My third observation is that we have no appetite to undertake outright purchases of private sector assets as part of a QE program. There are two reasons for this. The first is that there are no signs of dysfunction in our capital markets that would warrant the Reserve Bank stepping in. Things are working normally, and I expect them to continue to do so. The second is that the purchase of private assets by the central bank, financed through money creation, represents a significant intervention by a public sector entity into private markets. It comes with a whole range of complicated governance issues and would insert the Reserve Bank very directly into decisions about resource allocation in the Australian economy. While there are some scenarios where such interventions might be considered inappropriate, those scenarios are not on our radar screen at the moment. My fourth point is that if, and it's important to stress the word if the Reserve Bank were to undertake a program of quantitative easing, we would purchase government bonds and we would do it in a secondary market. An important advantage of buying government bonds over other assets is that the risk-free interest rate affects all asset prices and all interest rates in our economy. So it gets into all the corners of the financial system, unlike interventions in just one specific private asset. If we were to move in this direction, it would be with the intention of lowering risk-free interest rates out along the yield curve. As with international experience, this would work through two channels. The first is the direct price impact of buying government bonds, which obviously lowers their yields. And the second is through the market expectations or signalling effect, with the bond purchasers reinforcing the credibility of the Reserve Bank's commitment to keep the cash rate low for an extended period. The thing is, you can see in this chart, the government bond yield curve at the moment currently sits around 20 basis points on average over the overnight index swap or OIS curve. Purchasing government securities would compress this differential, and it could also flatten the OIS curve through the expectations or signalling effect I just mentioned. A lower term premium would lower borrowing costs for both governments and private businesses, and it would bring the benefits that come with that. And you could also expect an exchange rate effect from us buying government securities. Our current thinking is that QE becomes an option to be considered at a cash rate of 0.25%, but not before that. At a cash rate of 0.25%, the interest rate paid on surplus balances of the Reserve Bank would already be at zero given the corridor system that we operate. So from that perspective, we would, at that point, be effectively dealing with zero interest rates in Australia. My fifth and final point is that the threshold for undertaking QE in Australia has not been reached, and I don't expect it to be reached in the near term.
Let's see about that.
In my view, there is not a smooth continuum running from interest rate reductions to quantitative easing. It's a bigger step to engage in money-financed asset purchase by the central bank than it is to cut interest rates, so there's a bigger hurdle. There are, however, circumstances where QE could help. The international experience is that in stressed market conditions, the Reserve Bank, so the central bank, can help stabilise the situation by buying government securities. That experience also suggests that QE does put additional downward pressure on both interest rates and the exchange rate. We would need to balance these positive effects with the possible side effects in assessing the case for QE at an interest rate of 0.25%. We would also need to consider the effects on market functioning. We are conscious that government securities play a critical role as collateral in some of our financial markets. Given the limited supply of government debt on issue, the Reserve Bank and APRA have already had to put in place special liquidity arrangements for the banking system, so we have to take that into account. We're also conscious that the Australian government's fiscal position means that the gross stock of government debt is projected to decline relative to the size of the economy over the years ahead. These market considerations are not impediments to undertaking QE, but we would need to take them into account. It's a reasonable question to ask, what might be the threshold to undertake QE in Australia? It's difficult to be precise, but QE would be considered if there were an accumulation of evidence that over the medium time we're unlikely to achieve our objectives. In particular, if we were moving away from, rather than towards our goals for both full employment and inflation, the purchase of government securities would be on the agenda of the Reserve Bank Board. In this world, I would hope other public policy options were also on the country's agenda. At the moment, though, we are expecting progress towards our goals over the next couple of years, and the cash rate is still above the level at which we would consider buying government securities. So QE is not on our agenda at this point in time. It's important to remember that the economy is benefiting from the already low level of interest rates, from the recent tax cuts, from ongoing high levels of spending on infrastructure, on the upswing in housing prices in some markets and on a brighter outlook for the resources sector. So there are a number of things that are supporting growth at the moment. Given the significant reductions in interest rates that have taken place over the past 6 months and the long and variable lags, the board has seen it as appropriate to hold the cash rate steady as it assesses both the growth momentum here and the growth momentum elsewhere around the world. The board is also committed to maintaining interest rates at low levels until it is confident that inflation is sustainably within the 2 to 3% target range. It's also important to remember that the central scenario for the Australian economy remains for economic growth to gradually pick up from here to reach around 3% in 2021. This expected pickup in growth should see a reduction in the unemployment rate and it should see a lift in inflation. So we are expecting things to be moving in the right direction, although they're only moving in the right direction gradually. The board continues to discuss what role it can play in ensuring that this progress takes place and how it might be accelerated. It recognises the benefits that would come from faster progress, but it also recognises the limitations of monetary policy and the importance of keeping a medium-term perspective squarely focused on maximising the economic welfare of the people of Australia. There may come a point where QE would help promote that collective welfare, but we're not at that point, and I don't expect us to get there. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward to answering the questions.